Welcome to CIHT Podcasts.
Today we look at the stuff that was once science fiction, cars that can drive themselves, but that might soon become the next leap forward for the automotive sector. I'm delighted to have a panel of three people working at the forefront of this. Iain Forbes, Head of the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles, Professor Nick Reed from TRL, involved with a lot of the research in this field, and Anders Eugensson from Volvo Cars, a company trialling 100 autonomous vehicles in real traffic on popular commuter routes in Gothenburg next year. So welcome all. Iain, can we start with you? The UK government wants to help lead the world in this transformation. Can you explain how?
Thanks, Justin. I think this is a hugely exciting agenda and something the government is really excited about. There are some truly transformational changes in various technologies which can have a real impact on the way our transport system operates. And as a government, I think that we're keen to make sure that the UK positions itself to take advantage of those technologies. There are a number of reasons why, as a government, we should be interested in this. So the potential for the technology to impact on and improve road safety, I think, is hugely exciting. The vast majority of road traffic accidents have human factors at play, and to the extent to which technology can help us reduce the number of accidents on our road, I think that's hugely exciting. I think the potential for the technology to help us run our networks more efficiently and to help make driving a more pleasant experience for people on our roads. I think the possibility of opening up transport options to people who currently have few, so that they can have autonomy over their own transport choices. And I think the ability to give people back some of the time they currently spend driving, all of these things I think are hugely exciting social benefits which the government is keen to capture. There's also a really interesting economic prize there too. So serious people in the automotive industry are kind of taking this very, very seriously and making real investments in the technology. And we're keen as a government to make sure the UK captures some of that benefit too, so that we get we build an already resurgent automotive sector to get the benefits there. So a really, really exciting set of technologies and something the government's really keen to take advantage of. And in terms of how we do that, well, a lot of the really exciting work's going on in industry. As a government, we've done a couple of really big things to try and capture the benefits. The first is to have a look at our regulatory system. So one of the barriers or potential barriers that people talk about when they discuss autonomous vehicles relates to how regulation could potentially get in the way. And we were keen to understand whether that was the case in the UK and what potential barriers there might be. So we had a look, we did an audit, a check of all the various different regulations in the UK which might act as a barrier, and found something really interesting, which is that as long as manufacturers follow some basic rules, follow road traffic law, and kind of do what they're doing in a safe way, you can test autonomous vehicles on any road in the UK, which isn't the case in other countries. So we found that our current regulatory system is a very welcoming environment for people who want to test here, which is great. The second thing is helping people in industry and academia with the burden of kind of trying to unlock some of the benefits of the technology. So we're investing heavily in demonstration projects and research, and you'll hear some more about that from Nick and others, I'm sure, over the course of the discussion. So working together to make sure that collectively in government, in academia and industry, in local authorities, we're demonstrating the projects collaboratively so that we can learn about how together we can capture the benefits. So a really, really exciting area, and one the government's keen to make sure that we make the most of.
You provided a good link into the next question to Nick about the actual trials and some of the research and unpicking some of the behavioural elements and what's happening. Perhaps you could explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, so TRL is working on a number of projects related to trials of automated vehicles. This is real-world activity where we can test automated vehicles and understand how people learn to trust and accept the use of these vehicles as part of the urban mobility landscape. And we've pulled that together in the form of the UK Smart Mobility Lab. This is the use of the Borough of Greenwich as our test environment for automated and connected vehicles. 3 projects currently being delivered in the Living Lab. One of these is Gateway, Gateway is funded by Innovate UK, and there are 13 partners involved in the project. And this year we will have automated shuttle vehicles, automated delivery vehicles operating in Greenwich, and we'll be looking to see how do the public, how do industry respond to those vehicles as part of the heartbeat of the city, a circulation of people and goods. How can those movements be improved through the use of automated vehicles? A second project that's about to get underway is called Move UK, and that's being led by Bosch in partnership with TRL, with Direct Line Insurance, with The Flow, with the Royal Borough of Greenwich, and they'll be using vehicles from another partner, Jaguar Land Rover. Those vehicles will be fitted with the latest automation systems, but they will always be driven by humans. And in that project we'll be collecting a huge amount of data to compare how did the humans behave in a range of different situations compared to how did the automation systems, how would they have chosen to behave in those same situations. So why a particular roundabout did the driver choose to pull out when the automation systems would have waited. Making those comparisons will enable us to develop and accelerate the validation of automation systems that can really work in complex traffic situations. And then the last project is Atlas, and that's a project to look at the data that's collected by automated vehicles and understand how that data can be used for asset management in understanding the environment around us. These vehicles are collecting huge amounts of data from cameras, from laser sensors. What other values, besides the guidance of vehicles, can we get from that data? So that's all going on in Greenwich. That's really exciting, and many other things too. But aside from that, we're also looking at how automated vehicles will change highways. So we have a European project that is looking at what do the national roads authorities need to be doing now to prepare for the changes that are coming from connected and automated vehicles. So we're consulting with roads authorities from across Europe to understand what's going on, what changes are happening, and how should the national roads authorities respond to that. Do they need to be doing huge amounts, or do they need to be doing less? So is it down to the private sector to deliver the benefits from connected and automated vehicles, or should the national roads authorities do more to support the deployment to make sure we get the benefits that Iain has described? So that's an exciting project. And finally, the other project to talk about is the Connected Corridor. So this is a link between Dover and Greenwich, the A2M2 corridor that Highways England, Department for Transport for London are looking at as an area where they would deploy connectivity along the whole route. And we're doing the feasibility study to understand what services that would enable. Among them, you can think about automation, but also simpler things around traffic management and how to respond in collision scenarios. So that's a whole range of stuff that's going on. Really exciting to be involved, to be at the heart of these activities and seeing how the sorts of predicted benefits that automated and connected vehicles can bring will actually be achieved in the real world.
Interesting. And sort of talking of live trials, you've got an ambitious one next year in Gothenburg, and there's 100 vehicles out in commuter areas. Can you tell us a bit more about what's happening with that trial there?
Thank you, Justin. Absolutely. Well, first of all, we want to do this in many places, but we're starting with Gothenburg because that's close to our headquarters and that's where we have facilities. And what we're going to do is we're going to launch 100 cars on a commuter road around Gothenburg, which is going to be normal drivers, not people like myself who are, will geeks and want to look at this as a wonderful way of testing. And normal people driving in the normal way they commute to their work. And we're going to be a fleet customer, so it's going to be least cost to the fleet customers, and they're going to hand them over to the people, their employees, who do a lot of driving on that commuter road. And that's very exciting because that's going to give us a chance to explore how this works in real life, in normal custom, and in relation to normal road users too. Not just this is going to be do carriageway, which is mixed traffic, so not pedestrians, bicyclists, but otherwise it's perfect normal traffic. And we're very excited to see how this plays out. But we're thinking of doing this in many other places in the world, and this place we're in here now is very exciting for us too. So we believe it's not going to take that long until we take that Gothenburg experiment to England, to UK, probably in this city too. So I think that this is going to be very exciting to roll this out, and we think it's going to be something very, very much of high interest to not just the authorities and academia, but everyone, basically, because it affects, like Iain was saying, this affects so much of society. And I just would say how much I agree with Iain's analysis. And this is going to change so much, because the transportation sector is facing so many challenges with urbanization and safety issues and congestion, and this basically addresses most of them. So if we can get this going, I think we have
a huge opportunity.
Yes, and transportation is the backbone of modern society, so we have to deal with all these challenges. And we think this is one way of doing it.
And how, in horizon terms, how long do you think it will be till customers are buying autonomous vehicles? Do you see, what would be views on that? Is 5 years, 10 years? When it...
Justin, it depends on what you offer them. So if you offer them the right thing, we think this is going to play out pretty soon. If you offer them something, it's going to cost. There's going to be an additional cost. If you get something for that cost, they're going to buy it. If it's more like a technology you can't use for anything real or useful, people are not going to buy it. So I think, and then comes a challenge, and I think that's why we're so keen on being here in the UK, because I think your government has the right approach. But Iain was saying the regulatory approach is right. How can we play this out so the drivers can do other things while behind the steering wheel? I'd just like to add something. I was in the United States earlier this week, and we had a meeting with the US government, and the administrator of the US government asked us, so what do you think how should we do guidelines? They're creating guidelines for autonomous vehicles for all the states, and we said the UK Code of Practice is the one we've... So we wanted to shape it. So I think what's happening here in the UK is going to be very useful and good for us to make this really useful for customers.
If I could just make one follow-up point, I think that all sounds hugely exciting. There's a risk sometimes when we talk about autonomous vehicles that our minds jump to the far-off distance when we have fully autonomous vehicles everywhere, which are kind of replacements for our current system. One of the really exciting thing about the underlying technology is that I think we're going to get benefits long before we get to that point. So we'll see additional connectivity and additional kind of tasks being automated, which will happen before we get to the point where we get fully autonomous vehicles kind of everywhere on our roads. And it's quite exciting to kind of jump there, because it's something which I think people have been thinking about for many, many decades. But we're really excited in government, not only about that kind of vision, but also about the path to that place too.
Yeah, and if you want to ride in a driverless car, you can do it right now at Heathrow. The vehicle will take you from the business parking into Terminal 5, and that vehicle is restricted to the guideways that take the vehicle on that particular journey. What we're doing in the Gateway project is taking those vehicles, adding additional sensors and software from Oxbotica, the spin-out company from the University of Oxford, enabling those to be driven anyway. And those are the vehicles we'll be testing in the Gateway project in an unsegregated environment. So we need to learn how they will work, how they will detect pedestrians and cyclists in a way that people trust and accept across the areas of test.
Detecting things seems to be how a computer will detect a dog is very, very complicated. Is that something that will detect other things, balls coming out? How advanced is the technology now, just to get a feel for things? Anyway.
Well, your question, Justin, is how well can we detect different objects on the roadway, right? Well, we're just going to launch our wild animal detection system. So it's shape recognition is something you can build on constantly. But when you get into small creatures like dogs and things which are looking a bit, well, there's so many different variants, so that's going to be difficult. But what you need to do is decide what kind of challenges you have on where you are deploying autonomous vehicles. So for instance, we're looking at more highways, and as a first step, so you have to deal with everything that could be on the highway, which could be, of course, cars and could be pedestrians too, possibly, not often, but it could be something like a package dropped on a box dropped on a highway. And you have to decide, is this a box that contains something that can be of risk if you hit it, or is it something just bouncing like an empty ball? A shovel on the roadway. You have those kinds of things we have to deal with in detecting when we launch it on highways. And then if you continue on into city streets, then you have many more objects you have to. So that's what we think. Deploying this is stepwise.
And the acceptance of risk. Risk is something that Volvo have laid down, saying we take full liability.
Yes.
Which is quite a sounding warning maybe to the insurance industry. I don't know, or it's demonstrating confidence to customers.
I think it's the latter. We like to say to customers that we assume the liability because we want you to believe that we're not doing this unless we're not deploying this unless it's really safe. So and it's also putting a lot of pressure back on us, on the engineers back home, because we're saying this. It's going to be very obvious if something happens and we assume the liability and we're just sitting there saying, okay, we didn't think about this, but we have to make sure that it's safe. So I think it was cleverly done by our CEO, but he didn't know how good he was when he did it. But it's playing out.
No, it sounded like it felt like a move forward in terms of that. We talked earlier, Ian, about different generations, but that level of acceptance that you might get with it. And if you say, we'll take this on, then I think people will start to think about it in a different way, perhaps as being more the level of risk suddenly drops down quite a bit. I don't know, Ian, views on this?
Well, I think public acceptability is something which is hugely important. I mean, the technology will only succeed if people are comfortable with the technology and feel kind of comfortable driving in it. So it's important for all the various different parties who are involved, the insurance industry, the manufacturers, and others to tell the story, to explain to people how they're acting to make sure that the vehicles that they're taking forward are safe.
And that's something that the Code of Practice does very well, actually, is strike that balance between pushing ahead with the research, but also making sure that people doing the testing are doing the common sense things that you would need to do to give yourself that reassurance that the testing that's being done is safe.
And how you've done some research in how in simulators, is that right, about how people kind of adapt to it, how they respond to it? Is that right? Is it like
yeah. So that was a project by a colleague who was doing a PhD in driving behaviour, and she was looking at what would it mean for a driver on the highway to encounter platoons of vehicles. So platooning is the idea that typically trucks can follow each other more closely when they're connected electronically. So when the lead truck brakes, all the other trucks in the platoon brake in unison. But when they're following more closely, they get much better fuel efficiency. And what my colleague Magali was interested in was, what does that mean for other road users to see these trucks in close following platoons? And what we found was that compared to when they saw traffic at normal spacing, when drivers saw these close following platoons, they also tended to follow other vehicles more closely. So they didn't choose to follow as closely as the platooning vehicles, but there was a reduction in the following distances. So people were accepting a higher level of risk when they saw platooning vehicles than in normal traffic. So that was a kind of unexpected secondary effect, if you like, of platooning, this kind of contagion of close following. And it kind of reinforces the need to get out there and do trials to understand what the wider effects of connected automated vehicles might be on the general population.
We've focused a lot, obviously, on the autonomous side, but obviously there's the feeling of car evolution as well, and incremental changes, and the connected side of vehicles is something, obviously, that the centre that you're leading is focused on as well. Can you tell us a bit more about the connected element of it? Is it the platooning mainly, is that the main focus, or is there...
Well, I think this is another area where there's hugely exciting developments going on, and it's not just limited to one technology or one particular use case. It's part of a wider change in society as we become more networked, as more and more of the things we use and buy each day are connected to networks. So vehicles are already connected. You can buy vehicles which have infotainment services, which will kind of help you out if you run into trouble on the roads. And I think you'll only see more of that as technology develops. I mean, Nick mentioned one thing the government is doing with partners, which is just creating a testbed environment so that manufacturers and others can try out different connectivity technologies and show the benefits in a way which helps them develop their technologies, helps network operators understand what role they might have in the development of the technology, but also helps people who drive on roads understand what it might mean for them too. Another hugely exciting area on which we're keen to work with others to develop.
Very good. And Google's driven 1.4 million miles, and there's probably two observations with that. One is that Google's not traditionally considered a car manufacturer, so is this a tech company stepping into this place? Is that considered quite a threat to traditional automotive industry? I'll leave that question, maybe if someone wants to answer that they can. The second bit is how much you'd referred earlier back to the environment in America, but obviously they've already got a bit underway with it. Is that are we a bit behind them, or what's the feeling of what's happening in America with Google?
I think you have to set Google apart because they're, from us, because maybe it's what Nick is working on, that's more local communities and very slowly, like 25 miles per hour, moving around in Mountain View and picking up people and no steering wheel in the car, in the vehicle, which is totally different from our approach. And I wouldn't say that ahead of Europe, but I think, and if they got a big issue now because California is working on making this illegal to do in California, so they're basically pushing Google out of California, which is interesting in itself. But and we met with Google and spoke with them also, so we don't see them as a threat to us in the way that we deploy our cars, and their cars look totally different in every respect. So, and I wouldn't say America is ahead of Europe when it comes to the industry. I would say America is ahead of Europe when it comes to some of the regulatory issues. And I'm putting UK on the good side. There are some European governments who are working towards making this a very difficult process of getting the right vehicles on the market and making one stop the evolution, putting up barriers, which I think is the most threatening situation we find in Europe. So technology-wise, no, but regulatory obstacles,
yeah. Because it is a huge, the safety implications, I always think is one of the massive potential benefits, and Anders, you've got a background, I know, with safety, and do you see this as the kind of the vision zero, that this would be the kind of opportunity for really cracking that challenge that with the safe systems thinking that evolved out of Sweden, and this would be the kind of way to just... Yes and no.
It's interesting you asked this because I agree on the general level, as a generic statement. I think this is going to improve safety, and as Iain was saying before, that's going to help safety, absolutely. I like to think that Volvo stands apart because we have, for us, it's the development of systems leading up to autonomous driving is also what we apply and deploy for active safety systems. And the Vision 2020, what we had would be openly issued or stated in 2007, that's going to take us down to zero fatalities and serious injuries by 2020. We think we're going to meet that. And that's before we deploy autonomous vehicles to customers. So, but the development, as I said, development of those systems that goes in parallel. They go in parallel. So I think without the active safety system, we wouldn't do autonomous systems. But this is all helping along to get down to zero. And I think when this is deployed in more massive numbers on the roads, this is going to help safety, absolutely.
Just returning to the Google point, it is hugely impressive that they have well over 1 million miles of automated driving across their fleet of cars. But if you're going to prove that your vehicles are safer than human drivers, you're going to need a lot more data than that. And in the UK, the average distance driven between fatal collisions is 180 million miles. So you're going to need much more than 1.4 million to prove safety of automation. But the benefit of what they're doing is creating that database. So they're collecting the real world data, and then the same for what Volvo are doing in Gothenburg and in other places as well. Collecting data on the behaviour of the automation systems, the behaviour of other traffic in the vicinity of automated vehicles, and that can be used to develop the simulation and the validation models that can be used to accelerate that process and really give you the confidence that the automated systems are behaving better than human drivers would in the same situation.
I was actually going to add the same comment as Nick is doing it. But the mileage pool is done now, it's not enough. You need to add just not mileage but simulations and a lot of other analysis, and we set up it's almost like a nuclear factory chart of how this is going to be done. So that doesn't prove the thing, the mileage as such. You've got to do much more to prove that this is safe.
And it sounds from your perspective, looking from outside into the UK is actually going about it, thinking about trying to answer the right questions and so on. Like that's quite positive. So I think it's a good story for the UK. One question is about road administrations and about what they need to do, how far away they're from helping vehicle manufacturers, or are they? How far you'd alluded to the work in Europe, and what's kind of the feel of that at the moment? What do road administrations need to do, and what they're not doing, or what are they doing that's really good?
So the way we've been discussing it within the project is, should the roads authorities be doing a lot so that they can get the benefits sooner, or should they be doing less and allow, or not less, but should they be doing a minimal amount beyond the general maintenance of roads to achieve the benefits of automation? So just maintaining the roads, you might require a mapping company then to provide the maps that will enable automated driving. You might push the manufacturers down a path where they're not relying on line markings if you're not maintaining your line markings to sufficient standard. Or do you go the other way? Do the road authorities have to put in a huge amount of investment to collate those digital maps to improve the line markings to make automated vehicles more feasible? Of course, I think we're going to end up somewhere in the middle, but it's having the discussions and exploring that environment so the roads authorities can make educated choices about what they choose to invest to maximise the benefits for their customers, which are the people who are using the roads.
Yeah, and it's a real opportunity for network operators as well. I mean, I think that it's important for them just to understand the way in which the technology is going to come to market and the impact on their operations, but they're also hugely influential in shaping the particular way in which the technology is going to come to market too. So it's great that there are network operators involved in some of the demonstration projects, and that in the UK there are some organisations that are really looking at this closely to understand what it means for their business.
We think it's very good. We support very much the activities you're doing in the UK when it comes to supporting improvements to the road and what we need to do. We'd also like to explore the other side. What if you don't do anything? Because it's interesting to see if you use the existing roads as a starting point, what do you need to do? And some of the analysis we've done of London, we looked at some of the approach roads to London and see if can we use those for the systems we're deploying now, which systems we think of deploying here in London. And it seems to be pretty good some places. I mean, like you said, Nick, the line markings, we need those, definitely. And we have a bit of struggle with intersections. And it's a speed issue too. But we looked at some of the stretches of road going into London from the west, and it seems to work pretty well. And of course, if that can be deployed without investing anything, basically, I mean, that's going to be open up for many more places. What we have to do, and you mentioned some maps, we're working on those ourselves now, because we don't see anyone actually being able to supply them to us at the moment. because they need to be really, really detailed, and the grids are very, very close. So it's something which we started doing ourselves actually. But if that can be done in a more expedient way in the future, that will help us.
And because of the benefits to the authorities in what they would understand about their network from creating those maps, they would need to be updated regularly, so they'll understand where am I missing road starts, where am I missing streetlights. So there are definite benefits to be had beyond the guidance of automated vehicles, but to the extent, what extent will the roads authorities take responsibility for that? It's a very good question.
So it might change how roads are maintained as much as how they're driven on, in terms of data feeding back into the system and then changing how things work.
If you've got vehicles collecting that information and it can be used to improve the roads, then we should be exploring what data can be shared to help authorities in that maintenance process.
We get cameras in the cars already now, so we can basically record the streets, looking at other lane markings, other obstacles on the roadway, and that's something we've been discussing. We can share with road authorities and seeing whether there are improvements needed here if these systems can be deployed. So I think that's going to be good to have that communication and interchange of data and experiences. Because we can map a lot of that in the road network. I'm sure the road administrations can do the same thing, but it probably can help if we give our view on what our systems can recognize and what our systems can use and what's not good enough for us. I'm not saying that it has to be changed that way, but it's still a feedback.
Yeah.
Can be useful.
And what are you thinking about how often you're going to need to keep those maps updated? That things change over time, and you'll need to ensure that the vehicles are responding to what they expect when they're driving through them.
We're going to build the basic maps, and then the sensors in the vehicle are going to look constantly at and adding new information. Right. So once there's something significant being changed, the car is going to use significant what do you call beacons, or not beacons, but significant shapes around the roads to identify where it is in the longitudinal line of the road. And if something has changed, some building has been taken out or something else that's been removed, those maps will be updated using the data we have.
Right.
So it's not something we have to ask Google Maps to do. It's something we'll do ourselves in constant updating of the system.
Yeah, and I think that feeds into this point about the other benefits of connectivity, that the vehicles can be updating a map of the environment and sharing that with other vehicles that are going to use that piece of road.
Excellent. Well, I did have a question about what are the benefits and what are the unintended consequences, but I think it would be better saying what are the unintended benefits as well, because it sounds like there's a whole range of things that will spin off from the work that's going into the investment. So I think it's an enormously exciting time in automotive history and opportunities for people. So it'd be interesting if we could come back here in 5 years' time, sit with you and see where things are at that point, because I think it might be quite different. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing how things develop.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this CIHT podcast. A week after it was recorded, Volvo announced trials would take place in London next year.